Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How we doing today? That's what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear. We've got a great show planned for today, folks. We've got a lot of amazing speakers and a lot of incredible information to get through. I'd like to welcome everybody that has showed up today who wasn't here yesterday. We've had a couple people show up this morning, so it's always a pleasure to have new faces in the crowd and just to have everybody here. It's fun in these weekends because people come, people go. Some are here some days, some are here others. We had a person or a couple people show up yesterday and said that God had sent them to this conference. So apparently there's some good information about to come out, ladies and gentlemen. That's the only thing I can figure, but I truly believe we are divinely inspired. So I am really glad to hear that. I appreciate all of you guys who've taken your time, energy, effort, money to come out here and hang out and be with us and be with a crowd of people that really understands who you are, right? Really, you can have those conversations that you can't have in normal public. And you can feel comfortable that you're not going to be judged or be thought of as a weirdo or something wrong with you, right? This is the one comfortable place where you can share those experiences with other researchers that are going to be very, very interested in what you have to say. Our first speaker of today is a very, very good friend of mine, very close friend of mine, a person that was instrumental in starting the International Mandela Effect Conference. She's a board member, a really, like I said, just a wonderful all-around person. And she has some questions, like, what do we have in common who experienced the Mandela Effect? Might some of what we have in common have something to do with how we might be able to change Mandela effects? Could it be possible? What is the Mandela Effect itself communicating to us about how we might be influencing reality? Cynthia Sue Larson is an author of many books, including The Mandela Effect and Its Society, Quantum Jumps, Reality Shifts, and High Energy Money. Cynthia has a degree in physics from UC Berkeley, an MBA degree, a Doctor of Divinity, and a second-degree black belt in Kuksowan. Cynthia is founder of Reality Shifters, the first president of the International Mandela Effect Conference, and creator and host of the Living the Quantum Dream. Cynthia reminds us to ask in every situation, how good can it get? Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome to the stage Cynthia Sue Larson.
Thank you so much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, one of the books that she wrote that I just mentioned is The Mandela Effect and Its Society. This is just released 2024?
This year.
Excellent.
Just a few months ago.
And we have a absolutely free copy to give away, folks. So we've got a couple things. Number one, I forgot, I'm glad you reminded me, Cynthia. We are going to change the way we do the questions today. Everybody's been very respectful. We haven't had any issues. So we're going to get rid of the coupons for today. It's going to be an open mic situation. I have a feeling some of you guys yesterday were saving your coupons. I get it. But we're going to have the random choice of question of the day. So I want to hear all you guys' questions, and somebody will randomly win this book. So come on up. Make sure you have a question for Cynthia or the rest of the speakers today or even in the panel. And like I said, it will be a random choice. And one of the questionnaires will win a copy of The Mandela Effect and Its Society, thanks to Miss Cynthia Sue Larson.
This book has the hardcover and the color illustrations inside. So a lot of people buy the paperback, but this one's going to hold up, stand the test of time when you flip through it a lot. It'll still look good. It's signed.
And a signed copy. There you go.
Questions, yeah.
So,
thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to leave that right here, unless it's in the way.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, and I'm so glad to be here. I love the talk so far. Today, my talk is about the science of magical influence. Now, this is a field I've been interested in, the nature of reality, all my life. To me, the nature of reality is very magical, and if you know my books, then you know that's my usual perspective on things. So the talk today will be focused on asking questions, which I think it's a theme that we've had throughout all of our IMEC presentations in the past, just recognizing that the questions we ask are extremely important. So I'll be looking at the Mandela Effect messages. That's the first section of this talk, followed by the quantum observer, that power of who we are to observe. Then looking at, do we influence Mandela effects? And then a little bit about an experiment this year. The Institute of Noetic Sciences had an experiment called the SIGIL experiment. I'll talk about that. And finishing it up by talking about influencing reality. So a good question that we could start with when we ask questions to nature, and nature answers, the way John Archibald Wheeler, the famous physicist, suggests. If you're interested in the Mandela Effect, like people have been talking about all of their Mandela effects, here are some of mine. I'd like to know, what is the Mandela Effect showing us? When we remember, like I do, you've got some splaining to do from I Love Lucy. I said that to Art Bell when he interviewed me years ago, and we just sort of flew right over that. Didn't really park on that and explore that. But if you think about it, what does that mean? You've got some splaining to do. And if you're thinking about the Mandela Effect, I think it's got some splaining to do. I don't know about you guys. Yeah, you agree. Show of hands, anybody else remember you've got some splaining to do? Okay. Yeah, Art Bell just went right over it because he didn't even notice that that was something that doesn't even exist anymore. Another one that's big for me personally is, you remember mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? That sounds right, right? And now, according to history, the Disney version has always been magic mirror on the wall. So we've gone from that nice mirror, mirror on the wall, it sounds nice, to the inclusion now of magic. Magic sort of pushed its way in here. Is it trying to tell us something? Another big one for me is one we talked about at our first conference in Ketchum, when we had HBO there, and it was this big one. It's about objects in the mirror may be closer than they appear. My personal anchor memory for this one is watching Jurassic Park, because you know how funny that was? It's like, oh my gosh, objects in the mirror may be larger, and you're seeing this dinosaur coming at you, like full speed. It's already looking pretty big. It's like, oh no. So that was my anchor memory for that particular one. But what's that trying to tell us? What does that mean? Objects in mirror are closer than they appear. What we remember is what I'm looking at for the clues. My fourth clue here for today is one of my favorites. It has to do with Tinkerbell. And if you just saw my interview that came out the other day with Alex Ferrari on Next Level Soul, I was talking about Tinkerbell. And I'm looking at the comments coming in on that episode because he gets such a great following on his channel. And he's got lots of people, dozens of people saying, I remember Tinkerbell. So show of hands, Tinkerbell at the beginning of Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday. And you remember what it looks like. How do we all remember the same thing, right? It's like she sort of twinkles in, she does her little thing, and then ting, it's very playful, and it's just like the best part of the intro. Now it's gone? Like what? And what is that trying to tell us? Let's go through these. Okay, so if we look at the first one, and we know that nature's trying to tell us something, and the Mandela Effect is like, what is it showing us? Well, nature has some splaining to do. Now, if most physicists, if they're honest, that's their approach. That's what they want to know. Why is there anything at all? What's going on? What's the nature of reality? But we really want to know because we're seeing it change, and we are not going to be gaslit about what we remember. Secondly, look more deeply and see the magic is what I see in magic mirror on the wall. Because we're looking at, instead of mirror, mirror, magic mirror on the wall. So what if we can look a little bit more deeply? And when we do, what if we start getting just blown away with the wondrous nature and the true nature of reality and ourselves? The third one is that objects in the mirror may be closer than they appear. Your connection to nature's magic is very close. What does that mean? Okay, this is getting exciting. And lastly, but not least, remember that you bring the magic. So when we remember Tinkerbell, we can't forget that. And that little magic wand, it's like we need to bring that back. And so this is a big message when I put all this together. Nature has some splaining to do. We can look more deeply and start to see this magic. The connection to the magic is very close. In fact, it's so close, it's inside of us. We're bringing it. So who are we is the question that I'd like to start with today. These are some big questions. Who are we and what's the nature of reality? And I've been wondering that all my life. Like, what is really going on? Because to me, I was from the age of being a young child seeing things that weren't there, that I couldn't really talk to people about because, like, well, I'd see dark, scuttly things running around in the house, and I'd know this house needs cleaning, but I was in a home that they didn't talk about these things. So there's a whole lot that could not really be talked about politely, apparently, like a whole lot of questions. But fortunately, when I would ask questions, I would get answers, usually, quite often, because of, sort of high-level communication, answering internally. But the questions I'd like to start with today is, are we in the cosmos fundamentally physical, or are we fundamentally consciousness itself? And here we've got a cartoon, with the little professor just sort of doing that magic trick, like poof, consciousness does everything. We don't really know, is the truth. However, a lot of scientists, including people that I respect, here I'm pictured with Henry Stapp, a friend of mine. He's a physicist who studied with Wolfgang Pauli. And so some of the people in science, in physics, that would agree that consciousness is fundamental, of course, include Niels Bohr, who said consciousness is fundamental. You can't get behind consciousness. I would agree with that. Erwin Schrödinger himself, of the famous Schrödinger's cat experiment, Arthur Eddington, Wolfgang Pauli, Max Planck. Max Planck is the one I wanted to credit with the term quantum itself. That's Max Planck right there. And I think that was his quote. I misquoted saying Niels Bohr. I think Niels Bohr would agree with it, but he doesn't want to claim credit. So that was Max Planck. David Bohm, who's the behind the whole holographic theory. And then John Archibald Wheeler that I mentioned earlier and he's a brilliant scientist who came up with lots of things like black holes, white holes, it from bit, and so forth. Eugene Wigner and Henry Stapp. So there are a lot of us who believe consciousness is fundamental. That means what we've been hearing about yesterday in the talks that we already listened to. People are agreeing that it looks like consciousness may be driving everything. So what does that mean in terms of who we are, and what role does the observer have to play? What kind of observer are we? Here's a movie poster for the movie Free Guy. And it's the idea of the film, of course, is that there's this awakening that's happening within a character in the movie who's feeling like there's something else going on here. And I think a lot of us who are being Mandela affected can relate to that. And so is it possible, the movie sort of suggesting you can take a non-player character, an NPC in game theory, and they can have this sort of awakening. We can be more than just our mortal selves, our physical avatar, but we can recognize we are the consciousness that is sort of running this little puppet show of, a little mortal physical life that has some physical limits. So if we're causal agents capable of making timeline selections, shifting reality, and quantum jumping as source operators and conscious creators, you heard about that with Christopher's Anatra's talk, was excellent talk about game theory, then looks like something is going on here. I'm now going to go through the work of someone that's going to be hard to find this work because he does not have it currently up, but I consider it historic and very pivotal. I'm in a privileged position. I've been researching the Mandela Effect for 25 years. So what's happening with me is I see when people come into the field, they may come in, do a few things, vanish. Mr. Lupo, Dr. Lupo, is still with us, but he's changed his focus, as some of these people do. But his work is so important, I'm going to highlight it. Back in 2017, Dr. Taryn Lupo, who's a chiropractor, he created a survey wondering why us, what do we all have in common? He had 27,000 people going through this video back when it was up and running on YouTube. And I think the important thing here is you'll see the numbers. He's looking to see, is there some sort of a distinctive neural pattern that they might have? Do they have, photographic memory, eidetic memory? Are they OCD, obsessive compulsive? Do they have learning disabilities? Do they have more than one of these? 27% did have more than one of these, but 35% had none of those. So I'd say this may not be that big a factor. It's interesting. The next category, these are the next figures here. Yeah, this is funny. I'm not going to say anything because we're going to put this video on YouTube, so I'm going to keep it real vanilla. But it's important. 68% of us I think I know why there's a distrust of authority. Because if you love asking questions, and raise your hand if you love asking questions. There we go. Notice what's happening here. We love to ask questions. Who does not like having questions asked? Authority. I think there's a big clue here. That one's a big one, 68%, so remember that. The next one category is he's looking at diet, what kind of food. I'd say this is not a big deal, but he noticed that only 12% were vegetarians. He noticed 40% ate the standard junk food diet. Now, this may not be optimal. Chris was saying you can raise your vibration if you want to by changing your diet. So this is not saying don't change your diet. It's just saying when Dr. Lupo did the survey, he didn't really notice a strong statistical correlation at that time. This is a big one. 67% are spiritual. They're self-identifying as being not necessarily religious, because that was 16%. Or remember the authority thing. 10% agnostic, 4% atheist. I think this is very significant at 67%. And the biggest one of all, this is the one I've noticed too. In 2017, Dr. Taryn Lupo found out that 86% would say they've always been an empath. So show of hands on empaths, self-identified. Yeah, there we go again. Okay, so this is a big deal. And I said I've also done research. I've done a study. This is back in 2018. I did a survey of 470 people that, first of all, finding out what are the correlations between the Myers-Briggs interest inventory that you can take today online for free. You can find out what your type is today. Maybe it changes, doesn't tend to change too much. And then there's a very interesting correlation here. What you're seeing, I've darkened and bold-faced the intuitive feelers, because I think when you look at those numbers, it's striking. 26.6% or INFJ. That is huge, because in the general populace, INFJs are only 1 to 3% of the population. They are a total outlier. Like 99% of the rest of the world is what you would call NPCs if you're an INFJ. We are, I'm saying we because I identify as INFJ, could change. These things change, and in my world, things change all the time, including myself. But it's interesting to look at the other NFs. The INFP, if you're wondering what is this, the first letter I would be whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. But the thing that matters to pay attention to here is the N for intuitive and the F for feeler. And then at the end, it's either a judging or perceiving. So we've got the 25.36% intuitive feelers who are INFP, 9% ENFP, 4% ENFJ, and 3.8% ENFP. So I'm not going to spend a long time on this, but it's something you can look into. And if you want to watch, I did a video on details about this on Shane Robinson's Unbiased and on the Fence channel. So you can check that out. And Shane's here today, one of our other board members. The third person who's done a study in this field, so now there's Dr. Taryn Lupo, there's myself, because intuitive feelers are empaths. They're the same thing. Now we've got Dr. Bernard Beitman, and he's a psychologist who's done studies, and he's rather well respected in the world, but he's actually done research in the field of what makes it more likely for someone to experience a meaningful coincidence. I interviewed him on my podcast, Living the Quantum Dream, and he's written books on this, meaningful coincidences. And the 4 factors that he cites are self-referential thinking. This will be significant in just a bit. We're going to get into that. That means you're associating external events as having personal significance. The second factor is high emotion. You could be really angry, really feeling love. Could be any kind of strong emotion. And the third factor, spiritual, religious outlook. Same thing Dr. Taryn Lupo was noticing, spiritual. And the fourth, searching for life meaning. I'd say that's questioning. So we're seeing a lot of interesting similarities here. Asking questions, searching for meaning, looking at yourself, looking at others, being not really wanting to have an authority figure tell you what to do. Okay, and then the self-referential thinking. This gets into the whole avatar idea that we heard about yesterday with the game theory, and the idea that the puppets, if you think of yourself, your sort of mortal self as being limited, it's only got a certain lifespan. But if you think of yourself as also simultaneously being the consciousness that runs you, the spirit that you are, then you are both the source player, if you will, and the avatar, the puppet and the puppet master. One of my favorite things to think about are these levels of conscious agency. It matters because we have at least 3 large ones. When I do one-on-one sessions with clients, I like to look at the high self, middle self, and low self. I've been doing it that way for 25 years. Science is catching up, and they're now saying, yeah, you've got neurons in the brain. Oh, we've got neurons in the heart. Oh, we've got neurons in the gut. Well, that's the way I've been doing this for 25 years, just to take a look at sort of how is someone feeling, what do they need at these 3 levels. And if you do that for yourself, you can start integrating yourself. And I think that's exactly behind what a lot of these QHHT and cognitive movement practitioners that we've got this wonderful weekend, they work with this as well. Okay, now let's get into some of the physics. We're going to just sort of wet our whistle a little bit. There was a big Nobel Prize given very recently, 2 years ago, 2022. The Nobel Prize went to some physicists who did work a long time ago. But that's the way physics rolls. Something that I think like that was news decades ago. Like, oh, they finally got the Nobel Prize. Great. Okay, so that's John Clauser, Elaine Aspect, and Anton Zeilinger. I'm glad they're honored, but I like to track the physicists who are right there with us in the cutting edge. So I often cite them like in my work, in my book, and so forth. So this was given because this is a huge breakthrough to recognize that there can be instantaneous quantum effects that can outmaneuver any kind of so-called hidden variables that your government or somebody else might try to be stuffing in there. There's going to be something that nobody can stop, and it's that true quantum nature of entanglement itself. And so it doesn't matter what people try to do. This, to me, gives me goosebumps, It means that you can be in that moment. And we're going to see more of that because I'm going to get into a little bit of that experiment this year. But one more thing I want to touch on before we dive into that is something called relational quantum mechanics. And here's an illustration from my book. It's one of the color illustrations showing, basically, it's Wigner's friend experiment. So you'll see that there's one scientist outside of the door. There's one scientist taking a measurement. So Eugene Wigner, back in 1961, suggested and proposed an experiment to monitor if his friend was taking a quantum measurement, seeing if the Schrodinger's cat is alive or dead inside the box. It's an experiment where if you open the box, then the cat's either alive or dead, but before that moment, the cat is supposedly in a superposition of states. So I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but I explain it in detail in my book. So the interesting thing here is if you've got someone who's, Wigner's friend opening the box, is it possible for that answer to be different than Wigner's answer on is the cat alive or dead? Theoretically, back in 1961, Eugene said, I think you're going to see 2 different answers unless one of them is basically God and has that ultimate, privileged position of knowing all and doing all. If you have that, then all bets are off. But what if you're equals? What if you're equal conscious agents and you're both source players? He didn't say source player, but that's our language this weekend. So if that's the case, you'll see that basically not only is that possible, but this has been observed now scientifically. Coincidentally, the first year that International Mandela Effect Conference got together in Ketchum, Idaho, that was the same year that, to me, the other biggest news of the year for us would be the experimental evidence suggesting that this was tested in a laboratory setting between physicists working at University of Edinburgh, Scotland, in collaboration with physicists working in, Austria. So basically, Vienna, Austria, Edinburgh, Scotland, and the experiment itself, the apparatus is a little involved because it involves 6 entangled photons. It's going to get too much to go into all that. But basically, they have the same ability to show that 2 observers at the same place at the same time got absolutely 2 different answers because they're considered equivalent. Maybe we're all one, we're all God, but that within this sort of an experiment, you're going to see differences. What does that remind us of? Does that look like the Mandela Effect? Yes. To me, it really totally looks like the Mandela Effect. And so this scientist, Carlo Rovelli, he's got a relational interpretation of quantum mechanics. I'm going to be talking, relationships seem to be the big deal because when you start getting into subjective reality, it's all about relationships within yourself, which is what some of the practices that, practitioners are doing this weekend with us. It's also about relationships with others. And the way that these, on the cover of my book, I've got basically 2 Wigner bubbles. This is a term not created by Eugene Wigner, but the term was created by Eric Cavalcanti. He's an Australian physicist, not yet won the Nobel Prize, but he did win a prize. I congratulated him on that. I like the cutting edge scientists, the ones that are kind of out there. And so what this Wigner bubble thing is you can have a group of people that remember you've got some splaining to do, and another group that say, what are you talking about? That never happened. You can have a group of people that say, Nelson Mandela died on Robben's Island in 1987. I know, et cetera, all the details. And then other people saying, I live in South Africa. What are you talking about? And I go into in detail in my book about the quantum Zeno effect and how that tends to happen. Because when you check, observe, that's the way to lock a quantum system in place. So if you want to be really OCD and lock something in place, you can do it. And that's exactly how quantum computers are working and operating. Carlo Rovelli's significance here is that he's taking a look at the relationships themselves. There is such a thing as relational quantum mechanics. This is what we want to keep our eyes on as Mandela-affected people. We want to keep tracking that. And it's all about the cut. Okay, what is the Heisenberg-von Neumann cut? Okay, this is huge in physics, and it's worth taking a moment to describe it. Basically, the von Neumann cut, you've got this cartoon kind of shows it in a cute way. You can see like this little, looks like a station, and it's like border control. The border is between regular everyday life, where you've got kind of, everything's kind of solid and you can measure things. And then just beyond the border, you can see Schrodinger's cat in the tree, sort of partly there, partly not there. Everything's in a wave function state, sort of partially manifest. For those of us that quantum jump and timeline jump, we actually might see the various timelines. Once you start developing this ability, you can feel like, I got a timeline right here. It's a timeline where I'm healed. It's a timeline where a locked door is opening, where, something magical is happening. But otherwise, what is this von Neumann-Heisenberg cut? In physics, it's a hypothetical interface between the quantum and the classical realms. It theoretically delineates that boundary. And this is, as it's depicted, the realm between the wave function of all possibility and probability amplitudes, and then the classical world. And when you look, this makes a huge difference in physics experiments, like the one I told you about from 2019. What they were really doing is recognizing that the quantum observer, they've got the two devices observing 6 entangled photons, but that connection between the devices and the scientist matters. Now, scientists know that matters. Even the muggly NPC scientists know that this matters. And that's why quantum physics keeps blowing their minds, because they're like, what is going on when we take these measurements and we're getting 2 observational devices at the same time seeing 2 different things? And that big idea that Eric Cavalcanti is proposing with the fact that we've got, like I showed the book, the 2 bubble realities. These are Wigner bubbles, as proposed by the physicist Cavalcanti. And he is winning awards for this work, so I'm excited about that. What's happening is, then we've got Copernicanism, which is each of us has the ability to create a Wigner bubble world. We can create, and some people are saying we're getting 2 worlds right now, like, things are splitting. It's actually, as the speakers suggested yesterday, probably a lot more than that, but collectively, maybe we notice 2 big variations. So this observer, this connection between ourselves and the material world is extremely significant. And the reason it matters is because this line of demarcation is it's this matter of conscious agency. So it involves all the questions: how, what, where, and when to observe. So it's not like a slam dunk thing. You might think, oh, that's nothing. That is everything. The questions are everything. Now we should love that, because we love questions. So this line of demarcation pops the quantum wave function, and it determines what is observed. And this is in my book too, so if you've got the paperback, there's a black and white illustration. This is the color. It's fun. Okay, now let's take a look at how we influence these Mandela effects. Now it starts getting really interesting. Do we influence Mandela effects? What might be what some people are starting at. Obviously I've got a bias in this. I think obviously we do. But we essentially are consciousness. If you start from that premise, it's a little easier to see this all happening. And we're experiencing a participatory conscious cosmos. That means we can expect to see a little degree of mind-matter interaction. So if I'm in a bad mood, then my luck is bad. If I start the day saying, how good can it get? It's a way better day. And you can even just use that as an experiment. Like on a day when you forget to say, how good can it get? What happened? And then when you keep asking, how good can it get? How good can it get? No matter how terrible things may seem to be, and it's not sarcastic, it's not ironic. You're just recognizing, I'm going to pull this up by the bootstraps from right here. And whatever the golden nuggets are, the wonderful blessings are, let's find them. So it's an attitude. I think it's a warrior kind of an attitude, actually. It takes a lot to have that kind of resolve. And then the question you might ask yourself is, have you felt like you ever influenced Mandela effects? Okay, I've had a couple of these collective Mandela effects that I feel like it may have influenced. You can never know for sure. I do remember when I heard that Jane Goodall had died right after Dian Fossey. Dian Fossey's death caught me off guard. It's kind of like Hurricane Helene caught us off guard. Then when Milton came along, it's like, okay, prayer warriors, we're on it. Well, I kind of felt that way about Jane Goodall. It's like, no way. No. One's enough. Don't do it. Don't kill off another one. And so I don't know about you, but I felt like if you were around back then, because I heard the report of the murder she was murdered in January 1986. I'm really grateful she's now not murdered, never was murdered. Yay. So I'm glad I remember it. I'm not glad I remember it, except for the fact that maybe we can change things. I know we can. We can even change things in the past. And then influencing Mandela effects, another one for me. There was a time period when I kept seeing the sign for Costco flip-flopping. It was going Costco, and it really bothered me. I don't like typos like that, and I'm like, what the heck? I thought it was a bad advertisement, like they just made a typo in the ad, but the business itself, I saw it as Costco. And I thought, this is terrible. But I was really preoccupied at the time, and it was sort of just a subconscious feeling like, I don't like this. And for some reason, it switched. One possible theory is maybe if enough of us are annoyed with a certain flip-flop, we might be able to see it switching back for our bubble of reality. And so while we might suspect we're influencing reality, here's a good question. Is there scientific validation indicating such a thing is possible? And that brings us to the sigil experiment that was conducted at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. Okay, this is fascinating. For a little bit of background, there have been a lot of experiments conducted about conscious attention. And they've been conducted at the Pear Institute, and they've done some random number generators placed around the world to see if those respond in advance before a big worldwide event occurs. So you can see like there's just this huge, this amplitude wave that's just going up and up and up, like a crescendo before 9/11 occurs. And that's kind of interesting. And there are some researchers that are aware that all of us are psychic, and they can take a look at what direction are things going. How can you forecast the future based on these indicators? Okay, this experiment in particular was designed, developed, and is being written up and conducted by Dr. Dean Radin, who is the chief scientist at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. He wrote a book about real magic, and it's worth noting that he considers there to be 3 categories of magic. We're going to focus on one of them, the enchantment one. That's mind-matter interaction. The other 2 have to do with basically divination, like kind of feeling into the future, like what's going to be happening, and mediumship, talking with those who are not physically with us because they're in another realm or they passed on or another reality, etc. So the focus here is on enchantment. And enchantment is just the magical word. Like I said, there are lots of words for this. Mind-matter interaction. Shamans and magicians practice this. So when Dean Radin designed this experiment, he put out a call to invite, actually, he invited tens of thousands of people to participate. And then he got 4,000 candidates from that call to participate. And there are constant calls to participate in all sorts of experiments. So if you feel like you missed out, you did not miss out. Check the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and they've got all kinds of things constantly running. This one caught my attention, and I thought, this is right up my alley, obviously. With mind-matter interaction, I'm fascinated. So we got the instructions on how to install the software, how to operate the interferometer. That's Dean holding up. He was doing a video training and holding up the little interferometer. And it's an extremely sensitive device. The interferometer, it basically is noticing interference between 2 waves of light. And so you're seeing both the amplitude, which is like the height of the wave function, and then the phase, and seeing what's going on with the amplitude and the phase. So the combination of both of those factors are being tracked. The device needs time to warm up. So when you plug it in, it just sort of sits there and you got to leave it alone. It'll feel footsteps. It'll feel if a car drives by. Or if you try to tamper with the device, it's going to register that, everything. And inside the box, now this is not like your typical interferometer that you might have seen if you've ever seen one before. But Cynthia, this doesn't look like an interferometer. Well, it's a style of using circuitry to emulate what happens when you've got the two photons interfacing and interacting with each other. So this particular interferometer is it's basically a transparent diffraction grating, and it produces the discrete points of light instead of the diffuse bands of light you'd expect from the double slit experiment. But otherwise, it's very similar. It's like a cousin to the double slit experiment. Either side of the dot are additional dimmer dots, and so on and so forth. Okay, what does it look like? These are the 50 boxes. Dean is very methodical, and he's just so elegant with the way he sets things up. So here are 47 black boxes. Looks like 4 of them have a black special covering. 3 of them have what looks to me like a Faraday cage. And he published this photo after the experiment finished. But before the experiment started, he said that he was having this idea that basically there would be an effect. He was selecting people who, could hold their focus of attention, pass a series of tests. Some people he just pre-screened and said, you're in the 50. Some people he interviewed personally, and they did a series of attentional focus exercises and personality questions to determine whether the person is basically a meditator or what he would call a magician. Magician being the enchantment style of magic where there's that mind-matter interaction. And so people that performed well in the first 5 sessions would, his premise in his experimental hypothesis is he expected the people who did well in the first 5 sessions would continue to perform well. And then basically he was predicting that focusing, this is kind of complicated, but there was a way of focusing toward or away from, kind of like rest or focus. And so there were little periods of time that there'd be a rest or a focus period. So why did he want to look at meditators and magicians? Basically because he was interested, what about an inward focus of attention? There are people that pray and they have an inward focus, and then there are people that focus outward. And so he wanted to take a look at, based on how people responded to those questions, who are they, what are they doing? He ended up getting 24 meditators and 23 magicians, 24 focusing internally, 23 focusing externally. When I received my box, because I was selected, he just said, you're in. I did take the attentional tests, so I guess I did well enough on those. And then I got I didn't know it was one of the 3 Faraday cage boxes, but I know what a Faraday cage is. So when I saw this, yeah, no problem. The Faraday cage, for those that don't know what that is, it's kind of like a cloaking device that prevents extra EMF kind of interference. So if there is like a wave function and you're sending waves to the machine, that's not going to work. It's going to have to be like that Nobel Prize that went with Bell's theorem. It's going to have to be an entanglement effect. You're going to have to reach, I knew that when I saw it. It's like, oh yeah, no waves are going to affect this thing. I got to be inside of it. I got to be one with it. No problem. So it looked like it was copper wrapped to me. I opened it up. I hooked it up with my computer, and I did complete I was given 10 runs to complete. I think this is fun because I can report on the actual experiment being inside of it and then on the outside too. I love that. So I did the 10 runs. 9 of the 10 were great. One of them, unfortunately, it was in the second half of the 10. I did something different, and I learned a lot from it, and I'm going to spend some time talking about that. But I tried to pre-activate my Kundalini energy in advance. I thought, well, if this is going so well, I'll just crank it up a little bit more, so then when I say this is a real run instead of a practice run, I'll get even better results. Well, what did I learn? It was just like the opposite of good results. It was so terrible, like the worst results possible. Instantly, like right after I emailed Dean, like, oh my gosh, I know he has to take the test result. He's a very good scientist. He's like, live and learn is what he said. And boy, did I learn, because I learned being in the moment, which corresponds to rule number 7 of Chris's game tips, that your avatar being only exists in this moment now. And so is it possible? I just learned firsthand. Can I crank the avatar that's going to be in the room pushing the go button with an advanced version of me outside of the room while the device is warming up? Yeah, no, that's not going to work. So it was really interesting. And be in the flow. Pippa was talking about that too. So we had two speakers addressing this. So what did I learn? What people want to know, what are you doing? What works? Okay, what worked well for me was running Kundalini energy, just feeling like this coherence within myself and just raising that vibrational state. I can feel it. I think someone like Dr. Bernie Beitman would say that that's a strong emotion. And I like to go with love. So I'm just feeling love, love, love expanding. I like to, secondly, to connect directly to Divine Source. A lot of people feel like someone's messing with us, like there's AI. Okay, I can see interference. Philip K. Dick talked about the architect. Carl Jung talked about it. Everybody knows about it. Rudolf Steiner. You can go around it, and you can go straight to Source. Never mind the interference. Third, I would sing to match selected reality, holding a high note. And this is just what worked. So I would do the test runs and I'd say, oh, this is working. And so I just go with what works. That worked. So for me, that worked. Every person's different. And that was, oh, by the way, you're looking at my device and my notes right there. I'm going back to that picture. Dean Radin, and at the top of the box was a button that would sort of light up and show colors. So it would indicate when it would go to white or green. First it would go green and then it would go white, and that would correspond with a high frequency that this software would emit. And so I could see the results real time. And if you're wondering, how did you know if they're good results? Because I could see the light going to green, going to white, staying at white. And as I'm singing, it's staying at white, so you're holding it. And for those of us who were present in the 2020 conference, I know we got at least one, and Shane and myself and a few others participated in an experiment back in 2020. It was very similar. So if you're wondering about it, if you participated before and you're wondering what was that, very similar. Dean sent us a little Buddha statue, a sigil, which is an image. A lot of magicians use a sigil. I personally do not. I don't really need a lot of accoutrement. I prefer to operate free of any devices, so it doesn't matter. So whichever reality I'm in, wherever I am, it's going to work. I like that better. Okay, so the experiment, the results, which Dean is now in the process of formalizing, he's had a couple of draft final reports. One quote from the final report is an exploratory analysis comparing performance by meditators versus magicians indicated that magicians performed significantly better than meditators. This may be the first reported scientific experiment studying the efficacy of magical practice in the context of the quantum observer effect. And his report did not include this image, so I want to disclaimer, this is kind of more fun and cutesy. What you're looking at is just a little image, a cartoon showing that the observer looking away is basically receiving sort of a wave function smeared all over the place. And when the observer looks, then you get the particle kind of paintball effect of splats behind the two double slits. And here's a chart that is from Dean's report, and more of the results showed that 47 participants completed 10 formal runs, which I mentioned. I actually did extras because I didn't want to bomb his whole experiment. So I just did like 5 or 6 more. I told him that was terrible. I tried something different. So I went back to what I was doing originally and continued success. But basically, outer focus more than inward focus influenced optical interference, which was a big, strong, positive result. And then participants who performed well on the first 5 generally continued to perform well, except for me with that fun little thing I did. But usually, for the most part, continued to do well. So let's take a look at some more fun stuff about influencing reality. And, okay, this is a good question for us to ask ourselves. What seemingly impossible situations would you like to influence? I love that I'm asking this before our workshop tomorrow, because you might think something's impossible in your life. We are inviting you today to drop that belief entirely, because I've seen so many things change that are just of a complete miraculous nature. Completely miraculous. You name it, I've probably seen it. So it's just off the hook stuff. And so if you know that can happen, open yourself up to receiving how good can it get in all areas of your life. In my book, I've got a couple of charts that go through quantum phenomena, and side by side I show what does that mean for us? What's the Mandela Effect phenomena that we might embrace? The superpower, the quantum superpower that we might reclaim. I think we all intrinsically have these, but most of us have never been able yet to acknowledge it or really open it up. And some of these things, the first one at the top there is we can have quantum entanglement represented by, I'm trying to read my own writing. Yeah, the backstory changes after the Mandela Effect occurs. So you see a whole new history unfolding. And like yesterday in the panel, more and more details popping up, like more and more, the dodo bird's back, and it's more, it's like more and more things are coming back. The quantum coherence shows that we can share historical facts with those in the same Wigner bubbles and groups. Quantum superposition means that we can choose between possible parallel realities, and those can be revealed by Mandela Effect flip-flops. So if you're noticing the flip-flop, think of it like the waitress or the waiter is bringing you a tray, like which dessert do you want? When you're flip-flopping, it's, I get to choose. That's how I look at it. Okay, and that's true for healing or anything. Okay, the next one is quantum superposition. Choose between possible parallel realities that are revealed. Oh, I just said that. Next, quantum jumps and quantum EPR steering. And my book explains these terms, so they don't need to be scary. These are very applicable to who we are and what we do. EPR is Einstein, Polensky, Rosen. I'm not going to go into it because I don't have time today, but we can focus attention and intention with basically energized, loving conviction. And it makes a huge difference. That means you can steer from the outside. It's like the Wigner's friend experiment. You don't like what's being reported on the news or by someone else? Don't worry about it. You're outside that. You're Wigner. You can change it. And if we get together collectively, we can totally change it. And we can do it working with our collective higher selves and our collective subconscious. Because we're the toroids that you saw in the picture yesterday. So what's happening? At our subconscious, we are a force bigger than anything can control. And the questions we're asking are good, especially when they're good questions that we want to live the answers to. Then the last one here is receive insights from future memory and deja vu. Boy, that's huge. You can be guided by your future selves, no problem. The next, I'm just going to go through a few more of these. They're kind of a big deal because they're open to us all. We can have, this first one at the top is quantum eraser. This gets into if you don't like something, then you can practice optimal detached observation and unobservation. You can basically, it's kind of like what Pippa was talking about. You can tell a different story about the past and totally walk through that. And the subsequent reobservation can cut through noise. There is some, I'm not going to go into all this, but noise, you can actually say there is no noise. You're just perceiving all this interplay of all the different realities. So you can start getting more and more focused on what you're looking for, like how good can it get? That's going to cut through noise. Okay, the next one is quantum teleportation. You can travel farther in less time. You can teleport. These are going to be increasingly common, and you'll find like, oh, we can all do that. And the more we do it, the easier it gets. It really is like the 100th monkey syndrome. And we are getting upgrades right now. I can't talk about all this stuff. Okay, quantum tunneling. We can walk through walls. We can move through objects. Objects that can appear and reappear. Random walks. You can follow the random. You can get intuitive guidance. A lot of you came here for that reason. You guys are wonderful. I mean, you're intuitive healers. You're empaths. You know that. And then quantum Zeno effect. You can lock preferred realities in. Like hear what you want to hear. See what you want to see. Lock it in. Observe, observe, observe when it's a good one. If you don't like it, unobserve it. So, and the more focused you are, the more you're running that energy and following these kind of tips I'm talking about today, the more, you can start generating really obvious results. And last but not least, closed time-like curves, time loops, and time shifts are totally possible. So I think, how am I doing for time? Oh, it's time. Okay. So I think we'll have questions and answers, but I've got one more. This is just the question. Just keep asking, how good can it get? Ask questions in your heart and soul that matter to you. Invite nature to answer. And you can ask questions now.
Ladies and gentlemen, Cynthia Sue Larson! All right, guys, like I said, we have decided to drop the question voucher concept for today. So if you have a question for Miss Cynthia, come on and line up over here.
Yeah, I'm interested in the time loops that you mentioned. Has there been any kind of experimentation or thought experiments or anything involving how to move out of time loops? Or can you speak further on that in any way?
Yeah, well, you did speak. There are different levels of time loops, and just like we can have personal and collective time loops, it's this whole subject. All these are really interesting. So the first part of it would be when you observed. I think you talked about it. I hope was it here about seeing that at the airport there was that person coming with you. Like
that was a little loop.
Yeah, yeah.
Loop, yes.
So I've shared similar stories in my books. You know,
Yeah.
And I've from a personal experience when it happens, like I saw a woman walk through a hotel lobby twice with witnesses. So it was not just me, thank goodness. And we had to talk about it. Like and we even interviewed her. Did you just walk through this room?
What
She said no. She said no.
No.
It was a consciousness conference in the year 2000 in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Wow.
Really interesting. But then I think what you're getting at is time loops and how to break through them. Like if you feel like you're caught.
Yeah, I mean that it's an area of interest of mine, which you may have noticed, and I've never wondered. I've never really looked at any science. You know, it's more just an intuitive download of about time loops and how to break them. And I just wondered if had been anything that I was missing out there, you know,
Yeah, well, language is important, and I think I love what you do with Twitter, with X, because you've got groups of people breaking out of loops, right?
Groups of people breaking out of loops.
And so
yeah.
the term loop that you're using is like a belief net structure. It's like they're in a Wigner bubble.
Yeah, the way I see it is like you know, breaking energetic patterns by doing something unexpected or anomalous. And I'm just really curious if there's what's actually going on on a kind of quantum level on that, you know.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now we're clear on the topic. I have not yet seen science on this, but I do talk about it with IMEC. Chris has brought it up in our open tables.
Yeah.
So I've changed my haircut. You know, I'm in a new reality. I've done YouTube videos on it too. So I think, but I haven't seen science on it yet.
Yeah. Okay. But
So a wide open territory.
Yeah. That's interesting about you seeing the person in the hotel room. It's the exact same thing that happened to me in the airport. So, you know, somebody walking past you twice. It's like this little causality loop. It's very cool. Thank you.
Well, if you change your perception, you change your reality, right?
Yes, and that's where that's where the levels of conscious agency come in, and meditating is powerful if you can just change your level of awareness to a higher level.
Well, it also goes like if I get a haircut, people are going to interact with me differently.
That's right.
Than beforehand.
That's right.
So you're literally changing your reality and how you're being interacted with and everything just in those small changes.
And that's kind of what I get into in my book, Quantum Jumps. Like just act as if you're already there. Do the power poses. You know, make those changes. And there's scientific evidence in that regard that does answer Pippa's question. So quantum jumps is, Pippa, I do have some science in my book, Quantum Jumps, about some of these things from a standpoint of like power poses in my book, Quantum Jumps. There's a lot of science that was not set up to be breaking out of time loops, but it totally does that. And all of that science I've got in my book, Quantum Jumps. Yeah, that such as it currently is, what there is of it.
We have another question here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
In your 25 years of researching Mandela effects, are you aware of any Mandela effect? So just for example, the fruit of a loom, it goes from the cornucopia to just the fruit. Are you aware of any that have been another level where the grapes were purple, and then all of a sudden green? Are you aware of any of that kind of, like multiple changes?
Any Mandela effects that have changed, then changed again, and then changed again, then changed again?
Well, yesterday, the JFK assassination, we're talking about a perfect example of that. You know, it started with, like Chris was saying, there was no sound, it was black and white. Then the next thing you know, like, oh, we got more than just one observer, more than one film. And look what's going on now. More and more people in the car. Now we got white cars. Now the main car is blue. It's not even black. It's like, what the heck? And so that definitely does show up. And I think now that there's a bigger community of us, now that we've got IMEC and we can bring people together, there's more and more focus on the topic, we're going to be seeing more of that.
So would you say, though, that the things that have already been the subject, we'll say, of a Mandela effect are more likely or have a higher propensity to be the subject of a Mandela effect upgrade?
Not necessarily, but it's possible. And like I think Pippa pointed out, there are nodal points. And so I think Chris has pointed that out too. Some certain events in history are just sort of timelines for timeline tug of war. It's like there's this battle going on, and you'll see it there. Like certain areas in World War II, and then, of course, JFK. So where there's a little power struggle, it shows up. Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question.
I really like that question myself as a theorist. Like, that one's got me reeling for a moment.
That's a good one.
Hey, hi. Well, I'm going to bring it down to the personal because I really like that idea of, the magical thinker or versus the meditator, the meditative inner focus.
Yeah.
And, in my practice, I'm trying to become more of the magical, out of focus and support others. And did you do any work about how to really be that kind of focused person?
How to be more focused?
And magical.
How to be more magical?
Yeah. Because that seems
the mind-matter interaction part.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there are things you can do to work toward influencing things. You can you can build your own little device where you can put it inside of a jar and telepathically get it to spin, like balance a little tin foil thing that's got like 4 little arms to it, balance it on a needle inside of a jar or a plastic case, and then you can practice spinning it without any energy fields or anything else.
And,
so there's lots of different ways.
Because it seems like it's just one of the ways to really open yourself up to how and to see more and to influence more.
Yes.
And is it in the book? Because I have an e-book.
Yeah, every single one of my books has exercises like reality.
I have the e-books. That's not.
Yeah. So I do encourage practicing and just play with it. It's really great to be like a child and have fun with it.
Well, I kind of practice in some ways, just seeing events.
Yes.
Manifest differently, through the filters of the way I perceive it and all that. But doing it like as an experiment, that's interesting. So it's in your book. Thank you.
So there are random number generators online and whatnot. There actually, we knew a guy in 2019 who set up a whole website. He did a talk in our first conference about
2020. Yeah, that's.
It was 2019. We were in person in Ketchum.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's on video. You can go back. What was? He had a special nickname.
Yeah, I can't remember to save my life right this second on the spot. Something like that. Chronos.
Yes. Look it up on YouTube.
But to carry further on for Miss Eve here, there are random number generators online at different websites you can go to and literally sit in front of your computer and influence the random number generators. That's what Dean Radin did a lot of work with, and you mentioned in your talk.
Yeah, he's done a lot with that. And I think there's constantly new experiments happening at Institute of Noetic Sciences. They have at least 3 that they're calling for participants.
I didn't know that myself. I went over there myself.
Yeah, they're a big, great source.
All right, we have another question, Miss Cynthia.
Hi, Cynthia. How are we doing?
Great. You can tilt the mic up if you want.
So this is a question from a skeptic to a scientist.
Yes.
The first, it's a multi-tier question. It's like a two-part question, if you don't mind. How do you view consciousness in terms of, is it on a spectrum, a vibration? Is it you have the abilities? This is in terms of like the NPC argument or the box of checking that box of consciousness. Do you see that consciousness is on a spectrum? Or do you think that it can be elevated, but it's not possible for some people to expand their consciousness?
Well, to me, consciousness exists. And what's happening is we're rediscovering our accessibility to it, and we're clearing blockages. To me, it's already there. I have a very indigenous viewpoint. It's like, what is original thinking? Original thinking is the thinking that's already there. The indigenous would say it's already there.
We're just tapping into it.
Yeah, we're tapping into it.
So do you think that everyone, because in Chris's example yesterday, there was a large number of a ratio of NPC versus...
Yeah.
So
well, to me, that matches... that's a great skeptic question, because skeptics in general want to see what's the measurable here. Like, prove it, and which is a great thing. Show me, prove it. Great. So it's hard to prove anything, but when you look at the figures, I'm interested in Like, for example, INFJs are 1 to 3% of the population. And then analogous, similarly, we're suggesting maybe the NPCs are the ones who are not empaths. They don't have that ability yet.
Right.
Maybe they'll never get it, maybe not in this lifetime, but that's their avatar. Their true consciousness is eternal. So even if if we say like, oh, those are NPCs, they still have a spirit. They're still connected to this all that is source. They just don't have everything hooked up. It's like a race car that the engine isn't quite in there yet. If you've ever seen, like, there's this great car, but it's got no engine. It's like, it's missing. It's there, but it may not be fully connected.
So the second part of that question was in reference to the study at the end. And then how do you view that in terms of if the consciousness is on a spectrum, or if it's a box to be checked, yes or no,
Right.
How does that impact the people who are being reviewed in those studies? If we're not all the same,
Okay.
how does that in terms of the studies?
The differences are very small. So when Dean Radin's, the paper is online. You can search for it now. It's like a semi-finalized final report, and you'll see like the very small differences between, efficacy and non-efficacy, and that's typical for these kinds of influence studies. We don't tend to see massive results. You might hope we would, but usually they're kind of small, but they're statistically significant. And as far as I know, he wasn't doing anything like what you're suggesting, like separating the yes-no consciousness versus spectrum. I think he was, the kind of questions he was asking to find out who is a magician and who's a meditator were just, those were the initial survey questions that we answered to kind of look into, are we depressed? Are we cheerful? There were a lot of personality kind of questions to kind of see what kind of people, and then he can sort that out and see where what's going on with the similarities. But the big one, and he didn't tell us what he was looking for, because that would wreck the experiment. I didn't know what he was doing. I just saw, like, oh, I got a Faraday cage box. I know what that is. I didn't know it was 3 out of the 50, plus there were 4 other interesting ones. So, and there may have been other changes too. I don't know. But, and that's important for the participant not to know. But as far as what you're saying, I don't yet know that anyone's doing a difference between spectrum versus yes-no. But that would be a great area of study.
Yeah, I think that personality difference also interplays in the out-of-body experiences with near-death experiences.
Yeah.
If we're not all the same, how can we have the same experiences?
Right.
In those
I love that question. That's a good one. Yeah, if we're not all the same, and we know we're not, then how come we're seeing the fruit of the loom, or we're seeing all these things that are the same? That's great. Don't have an answer for that.
second.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Sometimes I don't know is an acceptable answer.
I don't know.
Come on up. We're actually getting questions today. I'm so excited.
Well, pleasure listening to your speech. It's awesome. It kind of a limelight to me. I'm in a specter seat now, but with this thing with the time shift and stepping into different realities for myself, and I'm asking to you, I've had the shift since I've got here.
Yeah. Since
I've got here, spoke, the whole shift has changed. The vibration, the spectrum I was telling that has changed. And my question is, as we walk through different timelines, even myself as the shaman, as a magician, I'm watching magic happen in front of my eyes. That's it's crazy to me. But with that, have you been seeing that kind of magic the way I've seen the magic today too, since you've had that incident?
Yes, and people like earlier today, Jerry was saying people are showing up. They're feeling like I was guided. God told me to be here. Oh my gosh. And then the relationships that synchronistically pop up, it's like, that's crazy.
And that's kind of what that's what I'm experiencing. I guess it's really not, it is a question, but it's also not, because I know how I feel it. I've seen it. I'm living it right now. And I guess it's the part of, for everybody who's seeing it from a magician side that does magic.
Yeah.
You can always be stunned by the magic. It's kind of seeing the magic that you're doing. It's like, you see it too. I want to know if you see it, if I see it.
do. And Chris invites everyone. We're going to jump timelines when we come here. And so, we're putting it out there. Yeah.
All right. That's all I want.
Every year there's always this incredible energy that comes along with these. And last year, I hate that we don't have like clocks in our room here.
We'll do it next time.
Right. Last year we had 3 clocks. Chris can attest to this. We had 3 clocks, one on each wall, and each one of them had a 5-minute off differential from each other.
Awesome. Thanks for the question. You're welcome. Awesome.
And that is one more. We're right at the time. One more. Oh, 2 more. Okay, we got a couple lined up. All right. Are we good? We're good. Excellent. We'll keep going.
Cynthia, that was an excellent presentation. Really enjoyed it. So I have a comment and a question. The first comment has to do with time loops. And I thought just this would be interesting for people, that I had one of my Symphony of Realities, and I talked about Julius Caesar and how Earth granted him the ability to be able to have these time loops and learn from the time loops.
Right.
So a lot of times people will say that he's a master strategist, but is it possible that he was actually learning, goes back to a certain point in the game, and then it restarts, and then it continues from there? I just wanted to mention that because the whole time loop concept is super fascinating.
It is.
On Open Tables, we've had Dr. Donald Huffman,
Yeah.
and he's given a lot of presentations, and he talks about the structure, the quantum structure of the universe and so forth. And he talks about how there's a lot of leading edge physicists that are now saying that time and space doesn't actually exist.
Exactly.
And there's these new theoretical structures, one's called the amplitude-hedron.
Oh, you get two-hedron. Yes.
Yes, so there seems to be something outside of time and space that might be given a name like pure physics or something like that. I wanted to know if you had any thoughts about what might be beyond time and space.
Oh, thank you.
There's deep questions.
Yeah, nothing small. Oh my gosh. Well, I love the observation of Julius Caesar, and I'd love to see more on the time loops and great conjecture. As far as Donald Hoffman, these are big ideas from Chris. So if you're all like, woo. But the other one is really interesting because you're looking at Donald Hoffman's idea. Like what if space-time, which is what we tend to define all of what we know, space-time is like when you see the gravity wells around the Earth, like you can see that there's a warp around the planet and time acts differently. And now Donald Hoffman he was totally on our show. We talked to him about this, and he suggested we need a new math, we need a new science. And he's looking at the amplitude-hedron because it can solve some of the quantum physics effortlessly, and it can do it much more simply. But it requires this big shift in the way we look at mathematics, and the way we look at reality. I think amplitude-hedron is one step in a series of ongoing unfoldings of it's bigger than it's bigger. I think we're going to keep finding that. I don't think there's any end in sight. So, and I don't even know where we are with amplitude-hedron, and it's going to take time. Like we finally got Nobel Prize for the Bell's inequality, decades later. To me, that was like, wow, that was slow. But so that's what it takes. I think the consciousness of the planet is not always as fast as we would hope, but I think we're going to get there. Thank you. Great questions.
That was an advanced question.
Okay, you always talk about, creating your own timelines and realities and stuff. And I think one of the worst rabbit holes I've ever been down and still going down is with the child trafficking. And no matter how much I try to, think positively and it doesn't exist, it's always right there, right in my face. Yeah. What do you do about something like that?
Personally, I'm constantly, I start each day, how good can it get? How good can I get? How God can I get? So I'm owning that connection. And I'm recognizing that that I am connected in relationship to everyone. That's important, not to deny the relationships, even with those who are hurt. But sometimes we can't give that support at the moment. All we can say is thoughts and prayers, basically. But it's not I wouldn't ever cast aspersions on thoughts and prayers. Mm-hmm. When you're sending it from your heart with full intent and the full resolve, like they're going to find a fast way out. Maybe we can erase that whole reality. It could, poof, be gone. We've seen that happen with the Mandela Effect.
That's what I'm praying about that.
Yeah. So you're probably being called to look at it because you're being called to help transform it. So you can start looking like, is there less of it? Start paying attention. The way we track things, like on Open Tables, we'll look at the Mona Lisa. Is she changing again? We'll look at certain things we're tracking, and you can start tracking that. So is it starting to vanish? Because we don't want to see more of it. We want to see less of it, right? So we want to apply the quantum eraser to that. Just like war, just like any of this other stuff that we have outgrown. And then you'll be in the bubble, the Wigner bubble, which is the fifth world. It's the golden age. It's Shambhala. It's the one that shines like so brightly. And the ones that still need to go through that, because apparently, and I've had a lot of talks with oneness about this, like, can we just get rid of all the evil? And apparently there's a learning curve for a lot of beings. And so the ones that need the extra time, they need that. Some of us really don't want any more of that. I don't want any more of the deadly sins, any more of the Buddhist torments. I'm done with it. Yeah. So I'm like, Shambhala, golden age, here we come, heaven on earth. I need that. And so those of us who are craving that, we can help by just knowing that maybe we can reverse some of that out. Send help to the past for things that then it'll just be a memory. Like, wasn't it true that there was a huge trafficking problem? And like, what are you talking about? That would be great.
Yeah.
So that's the direction we're heading.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Cynthia Sue Larson. Thank you, Cynthia.